Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Jensen from Dean's Chat. If you're on the fence as to whether you want to join the American Podiatric Medical Association, jump on in. It's a new APMA. Whether it's advocacy concerns, scope of practice, billing and coding, consider membership at the APMA as your professional insurance. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the co-host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I am joined by my co-host, Dr. Joanna Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I am doing fabulous. 2 weeks post knee arthroscopy, doing better, a little more fluid, no complaints.
That's right. Day by day, the pathway to progress.
Lots of ice and lots of elevation. So it's all good.
Yeah.
Joe, I'm super excited about our interview today. Joining us from Colorado, Dr. Laura Brinker. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Brinker.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You are welcome. You know, we're pretty informal on Dean's Chat, so if it's okay with you, go first names, Laura, Joe, and Jeff.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, Laura, we're so excited. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with us about your experiences. Fun fact, Jeff, I actually met Laura in a lobby. She was going to dinner with a friend of mine, Ellie Nasser, and I believe you guys were classmates at
We
school.
were, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And just the way the world works, Ellie's like, if you don't know each other, you should know each other. And it was just a fun, just brief introduction. But Laura, I'd love to give you a formal introduction. Dr. Laura Brinker is currently the owner of a consulting company, Looking Glass Medical, but previously, just very recently, were the vice president of clinical affairs for Paragon 28. And prior to being the vice president, you'd held the senior director and director of clinical affairs for over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to Dean's Chat.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to hear some of your story because as I was standing there talking with you and with Ellie, it just very quickly became apparent that you have had an incredible experience in this world of innovation that not everyone has as an opportunity to be a part of. You graduated from the Purdue University with your degree in mechanical engineering, which I think is very interesting as it falls into place here. But then you also worked as a patent engineer with some attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
You hold a lot of patents. I don't even have a number. It was more than I think anyone else that we've ever interviewed. And then you did go on to finish your podiatric medical school at Temple University, and then did your surgical residency training program with the University of Louisville. So I would love to hear how you got into this. Did you know when you were a mechanical engineering student that you wanted to go into the medical device space?
Yeah, it's an interesting path because I was in school during 9/11, and I feel like hiring kind of during that time sort of fell off as I was graduating. And I actually got hired with a company in Boulder, Colorado to do med device out of engineering school. And I was really excited for the job. And then they went on a hiring freeze because of the economy. And I ended up getting hired as a patent engineer. And I was excited for that too. They worked with some med device companies, so I was able to be a part of the process of, at least understanding and learning more about med device via the patent process. Did patents for like a whole bunch of different interesting projects. But once I, tried that out, the next reasonable step would have been to become a patent attorney. And I just didn't feel like I loved it enough to go to law school and go that route. So, I kind of looked back at some of my favorite classes from engineering school, and I had taken a grad level class in biomechanics, and I just absolutely loved biomechanics. And I did a special project while I was in that class on plantar fascia and like forces going through the foot, plantar fascia, what it gets in forces and in different spots. And so I was really, I've been a runner since I was 12, and I had a myriad of injuries, mostly involving foot and ankle. And so I really wanted to learn more about, foot and ankle conditions and how I could help. And, I thought about medical school, but I was, already a couple of years out of college. I had to still take some organic chem classes. And I was like, podiatry school really felt like it was the best pathway for me to do what I wanted, which was to do more with foot and ankle. And, at the time I kind of pushed aside the medical device thoughts and, went for the medicine route. and, loved the schooling, loved residency, and was in practice and realized, I think private practice, I really appreciate the people I worked with. They were great. I just realized private practice just wasn't for me. So after about a year and a half, I was, kind of looking around, and I had heard of Paragon 28 only when I got to Colorado. I never heard of them when I lived in Louisville. And I was like, everyone's using them in Colorado. And I had a rep at the time, and she was great. She was a rep for a few different products, but she told me about the products in the company. And I was really interested because they were doing things a little bit different. And just given my engineering background, I was like, wow, a lot of what they're doing is really making sense. She's like, oh, the founders are really nice if you ever want to meet them. It was literally on my way home from work. So I was sort of thinking about doing some different things at the time, and was applying to either do like a hospital job or a VA job where I would be employed by a hospital. Or I was just sort of throwing my resume out to some other places, and I happened to send it to Paragon 28. And the CTO at the time, Frank Bono, he was also a Purdue mechanical engineer, just by chance. And so he saw my resume, and he's like, just stop by the office. So I literally stopped by on the way home from work, and started talking to them, and just, asked a lot of questions, and offered to say like, hey, if I, can moonlight, is there something I can do to help just people to understand your products and what you're doing? Because I was a new practitioner, and I was afraid to use them because I didn't exactly know how. I didn't know what all they had. Like, their website was sort of, really just like bare bones with their company information. And I joke that they gave me work that night and I never stopped. But in reality, they gave me a few small projects, more like in the medical education space for the customers. And then I ended up going on full time and stopping practice after a couple of months. And yeah, that was how it started. So it was an interesting start, and in some ways the opportunity was there that I couldn't turn away.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw the ball back to Jeff, because there's a million ways that we could take this, but I'm gonna let Jeff go first.
I was going to go back just a little bit through the educational
Yeah.
process before we talk about the Paragon 28 experience, because it's so
Sure.
unique. You said you had taken a engineering position at a company in Boulder, and which company was it, if you don't mind me asking? Because I've got a lot of connections.
It's gone through like the process. So it was a Bovie company actually, and I think they got bought by Covidian eventually, and now I think they're ConMed. Like, it's gone through a bunch of different.
Sure.
Valley Labs, I think, was the one in Boulder, was the company
Oh.
at the time, but early 2000s.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. So Purdue, and then Boulder, and then you worked with a patent law firm in Milwaukee. So you're not afraid to move around.
Well, I didn't actually, that job, unfortunately, they went on a hiring freeze right before I was to start it. So I ended up not getting to work in med device right out of college, though I wanted to. Yeah.
So where I was going with this is, when you worked with Paragon 28, and, aside from the connection, the Purdue connection, were they interested in the combination of your being an engineer and a doctor and bringing those together? Was that the ticket?
I think that was the ticket, because they were too small to hire someone like a doctor to be like a medical officer. And that's not the role I had there. But I was like a jack of all trades, and also just willing to roll up my sleeves and do whatever they needed. Like, I helped set up the booth, the first few years. Like, I was on a ladder hanging lights, and then initially we didn't have anyone in marketing. And so I was going to the printer to print brochures so people had materials they could distribute. I was helping to organize our first like doctor training that we had never done before, medical education event. So I was way out of my league in what I was doing, but I was just willing to try and get things done. And the engineering background helped, because there are some things I could do on AutoCAD to help, with products and sequences of steps of how they're used. And then I also did the IP portfolio for Paragon 28 for the first few years I worked there, before we had outside counsel, but I did the internal stuff that had to get done for that. So I think it was just that I could fill like 4 different jobs for them at once. And that's what startups are. You do whatever it takes.
Yep. Very eclectic skill set, and that's needed in a startup.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's fabulous.
Thanks.
Joanna.
And I would argue it's needed everywhere, right?
Good
This
point.
this this grit, this determination, this willingness to be flexible and do what the team needs to succeed are the skills that every employer is looking for. And it's easy to sometimes show up with some of that ego, like, oh, well, I'm a doctor now and I've got all this training. I'm not going to get on that ladder and hang those lights. That's someone else's job. But that's not the way you approached it, Laura. And I think that these are the skills, these are the soft things that matter so much that aren't always talked about. I'm curious, as you've gone through some of these different roles, could you talk a little bit about what a clinical director kind of is and does? And then you've also done a lot of work internationally. So I'd love to kind of, if you're willing to kind of explore kind of the differences between national and the US, and then how that starts to translate um, in other markets.
Yeah, so clinical affairs at a more traditional company is typically running clinical studies. So it's basically getting the data that's required either for marketing or for regulatory purposes collected and presented in a way that it can be used for the purposes for which you desire to get. So at Paragon 28, though, because of being a smaller company, it also included a lot of product development aspects. So a lot of cadaver labs testing devices that the engineers would be, bring prototypes in with the cadavers. And we certainly had surgeon design teams on different projects, but they could only come so often and you can only meet with them so often due to time constraints. And in order to speed up our development process, we really tried to do things on like a weekly basis with labs and break things and try again. And so that was encompassed in clinical affairs as well. The other thing that clinical affairs does is present like the studies in a manner that regulatory bodies accept it. So, if you're an investigational product, you're going to have to write like a clinical investigation plan and an investigator brochure, which gathers like all of the scientific data on your product or any kind of animal studies that were done to the regulatory agencies to conduct that study. If it's a post-market product and you need the data that's been put into patients, you're collecting and making sure that you have enough data for it. And if you don't, you're helping to design the studies to get that data. So.
Yeah, and see, this is excellent because I mentioned to you, we have students that will be interested in innovation in the medical design space. And some of them have mechanical engineering backgrounds or something in that kind of general field. But I think they feel like they don't know where to go or where to start. And so kind of getting an idea of like what are alternatives that aren't just clinical practice as a consultant to, as you said, like a surgeon design portion, but actually having the opportunity to be part of the innovations, like the true innovation space, knowing maybe areas that they can strengthen their resume, opportunities that they can start to look at, or people that they can talk to develop those skills to be a more sought after candidate is really useful.
Yeah,
Jeff.
there's like a lot of different departments in medical device companies where, sometimes physicians could either be fully employed or, helping out. And I think, thinking about the space of regulatory and quality or engineering, if they have those types of backgrounds, certainly also having a clinical background is useful and helpful there. So,
Yeah.
Laura, it's interesting. We have a new student this year, just came in for orientation this week. It was a mechanical engineering degree from the Colorado School of Mines right down in Golden.
Yep.
And her vision is indeed to get into industry down the road.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
thought that getting the podiatric medicine degree and getting more clinical experience really, I mean, in her mind, I can see her mimicking what you've done. We may be giving you a call for some mentorship.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do it. I love talking to people about it because I think there's not one way to go about it. I think there's different paths and different needs at different times. And sometimes you have to wait until the right opportunity comes up. But yeah, it's certainly, an exciting field. And I think one of the best things you can do and what I felt like was important is to help when you have these very experienced surgeons, 20 years or, even if they're younger, but just very experienced in a certain areas, to make sure that what they're asking for and saying is very well understood and translated to engineers that might not have ever done the procedure or really aren't as like familiar with the procedure. And I think that's what having that background is really critical for, is making sure your user needs are met, your design inputs are matching those, like just getting through the process of making the right product. Because you could certainly think you're on the right path and not be there.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I've designed a few products, and we had engineers, and we would do our market requirement study where that was kind of our template. That was where everybody brought their needs to the table. And if we designed a product that met those specs, the engineers were successful, even if it didn't meet our requirements in the clinic, because patients come in all shapes and sizes. Was there a starting point like that for you? Because with this list of patents you worked on, oh my gosh, you had a lot of balls in the air at one time. And how did you make those controls?
Yeah, so I mean, teamwork, like we had a great team of engineers that were with me side by side and doing designs as well. I mean, I think a patent is 100 you own 100% of the patent, even if there's 5 people on the patent. So everyone's contributing to those things. And I think having, a team around me and also our executive team and our leadership team, I mean, we pushed a lot those first years to get product out there. We wanted to make sure we had a full bag, and we wanted to make sure we were also developing product that people wanted and needed, and not just me too stuff. So the process included, what don't people like? What can we make better? What gives people, problems during their case or snags? And it may be instrumentation. It may have something to do with the implant, but the idea was, coming up with things as a team, both with the surgeons and with our internal people who had a lot of experience in ORs, to make products that were truly novel and innovative, and listening to the surgeons and what they needed.
I'm envisioning you being the conduit between the engineers and the surgeons that you're getting advice from, and putting it together, because it's not easy if the engineers aren't in the OR, they don't really have a vision of what they're doing. They can lose connection with relevance. So I have this vision of you being the kind of the conduit, bringing it all together.
I tried. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I figured. Because I mean, trying to get the engineers to understand what a patient really looks like live. I used to bring the engineers in. I had a little medical device company down in Wheat Ridge, and I'd actually have the engineers come to my practice at Rose Medical Center and see patients, so they could get an idea of really what it looked like. It wasn't just, this is to spec, so it's going to work for everybody, because that's not how it worked. So.
Yeah. And one of the first things I show people sometimes is, they'd be turning the limb over and moving it around on the table. And you're like, it's just going to be here, like you've got to move the C-arm or yourself, or this doesn't move like that. So, I think it's just, you get a perspective that's different from OR experience versus not, but also you just, sometimes when you're also designing in CAD, you're zoomed in, 300 times when you're working on a hammer toe device, and then you're like, zoom out, like this is way too small, like these pieces, you're not gonna be able to pull with your fingers, things like that, where you really just perspective, bringing that in the day-to-day.
Very good. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just say, I love that. Like, there's so many things. We talked to the students about this. There are things that are great in theory, but not execution. Like, yes, these things sound like they would make the most sense, and they logically follow this treatment algorithm, but these are the realities of why it doesn't work that way, right? And until you have those kinds of experiences, as you're talking about, Laura, you don't know what you don't know. So as an engineer who's focused on this one little sliver of it, the application in a real human, that the foot that's attached to a body that's on the bed that's not mobile, you don't have those perspectives. So I appreciated that.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, I was going to add one more question. When you were working in this environment, and it was very entrepreneurial, and it's a growing company, what was a challenge that you experienced that you wouldn't have foreseen?
Yeah, I think, the letting go part is hard. So when you start, just if you learn this, you could learn it as a practice owner, as you hire people, there's certain things that you've done since it was started or that you've done when it was, in its infancy. And you can't, as you grow, you can't still do everything, and you have to learn to let go. And that was probably one of the harder things for me to learn after, a couple of years. It was easy to let go. We hired a great guy for marketing. And when he came on, I was so relieved because he was experienced in it. He had a plan, like he was great. And we worked side by side, helping each other out. But there were other things that were harder to let go of as we got larger. And that, losing a little bit of the product development, like integration, I just didn't have time to be a part of as many projects as I wanted to be a part of. I used to be part of all when we started, but we got bigger and hired more engineers, so I can only do so much. And then, the intellectual property piece, I had to let go because I just ran out of time to do that. So those are just hard things, and you have to recognize that too. And I think that takes some growth as well.
Absolutely. Well, that's incredible to watch something grow like that. Very satisfying, I'm sure.
It was, yeah.
It actually reminds me very much, Jeff, when we were talking with Megan McClellan about kind of what the biggest challenge is, and I thought her answer was just so full of wisdom, and it was clarity. Like, we need to make sure that what we're focusing on really matters. And to your point, Laura, sometimes that means letting go of things we don't want to let go of, but we should, or we need to, or like that is part of that process. So that when you just said that resonated a lot with me. And on that, Jeff, that's a nice little segue. Maybe we have a quick shout out from our sponsors. So we'll take a little break and hear from the American Podiatric Medical Association, and we'll be right back.
Did you know APMA provides help with public health initiatives such as fall prevention, opioid abuse prevention, and addressing health disparities?
Did you know the APMA provides over $400,000 in scholarships annually to students pursuing podiatric medicine, helping the next generation of foot and ankle specialists?
If you're serious about this profession, if you want to grow, to lead, to make a lasting impact, join APMA today.
And we're back. All right. So, Laura, I'd love to get your take on the international portion. As I was looking through your CV, it's funny the things that you don't always think about, but of course that this would be an opportunity to be an international product. What was that like going through? So you worked with the EU, the UK, Canada, and Australia. What was that experience like?
Yeah, international is interesting. So we actually were in 28 countries, but those countries you just called out are ones that rely more on clinical data and clinical reports than some of the other countries that we worked in that were more just pure regulatory bench testing, those types of things. So yeah, the EU put in a set of regulations in 2017, and it was starting to be enforced kind of in the early 2020s, called MDR. And MDR really shook up a lot of device manufacturers in that you had to have clinical data on your products in order to maintain your certification in that country. And a lot of companies actually kind of dropped out of those markets because it wasn't worth it to them to do. And UK and EU have like reciprocity in their regulatory bodies. So kind of getting one allowed for the other. But it forced us to, we had gotten into the markets in about 2016, 2017, using literature and saying that, plates and screws are used in foot and ankle for these procedures. They're showing these rates of failure, and these are the failure modes and the risks. And we would come up with the whole risk-benefit analysis based on the literature. The MDR regulations told us that, no, you have to show for your product that your product meets or exceeds what's state of the art for the products that are on the market that are similar to yours, and treating those indications. And so we had to kind of go back and do all these called post-market studies of our devices in the US and determine how they were performing. And that was really challenging for us. But the reason we could do it was because we were small and nimble. I mean, we did, we quickly started to get these studies underway. We worked with other kind of smaller companies, startup companies, like for clinical research, you need an electronic data capture system so that it can all be electronically entered and the statistics, can be done on this data. We worked with a startup that was just getting going because it was cheaper and it was faster so it was just finding ways during that process of allowing for us to present our data to the notified bodies in the EU and get the product cleared. You also have to put quality documents in place when you're doing new regulations in countries that maybe things you didn't have to do before. And it's harder for larger companies to move quality documents through their company. So we were small enough that we could move quality documents relatively quickly and get the certifications we needed. I lost a lot of sleep over that because it's very expensive and you kind of get a shot at it and you could end up not having what they want. And you don't really know until you have the data in your hands. They don't really consult you and say if you have enough or the right data. And so it's all based on, rationales and things like that. So it's a challenging way of working. That was a change that happened, kind of around, especially with COVID around that time, because places also were sort of shutting down to research and there was a lot of uncertainty economically whether we should continue on. And it kind of pushed everything into 2021 and beyond to do it quickly. But part of being a startup, you get it done quick. And we had a lot of success there in getting our products in those markets. And thankfully, the work you do for those markets then trickles into Canada and Australia and New Zealand, countries like that use those kind of clinical evaluation reports that we generated. And it allowed for more country entry. But for clinicians, I would say the international markets rely more on clinical data than the US. And so for people looking to do med device roles, there is more, I would say, opportunities from an international perspective than a pure US perspective. So just a little nugget there.
Yeah. And see, like, these are the things that are just,
Mhm.
they're so interesting. And again, when I read it, it was like, well, of course, like, I don't know why it hadn't quite really occurred to me, but I figured, again, as having had students ask specific questions, we have students that they've had pretty remarkable international travel and all these
Mhm.
different interests, finding the ways that they can align. Because you had just mentioned this at the beginning of the interview, but one of the things that I love so much about podiatry is there are so many options that you can do. It feels like but it's, this one area of the body and it's so limited, but it's actually not
Mhm.
limited at all. And at various phases of your life, you may choose to navigate into other areas or pursue passions that you didn't know were there as you start to gain more experience and expertise. We had another entrepreneur on, and he was talking about, you just start to see where the problems are and you just start to
Yeah.
say, I need you to fix this for me because it's a really frustrating problem. So I appreciate your insights to some of these kind of less obvious
Mhm.
traditional questions that we'll ask some of our guests. So
Thanks. Yeah, I actually hired a DPM as a clinical writer for me, after just needing more help. And
yeah.
she was such an easy plug and play because she already knew foot and ankle. She had a writing background. She just had to learn the regulations, and she had a background in law as well. And so she could read regulations and understand them. So she was a great hire and is still there. And just, it's great when you can find people like that. And, there are people out there that have
Yeah.
these different skills. They're not one dimensional.
Yeah.
Laura, I
Jeff.
have a question for you.
Mhm.
Outside of regulatory concerns and
Yeah.
compliance and things, what
Mhm.
were some of the challenges that you had moving into other countries? I mean, different health systems, different
Yeah.
reimbursements, a lot of different challenges.
Yeah, the reimbursement's a big piece. We ended up trimming down our systems to be smaller and lighter. Some with like shipping costs to get things shipped around and moved around, but also they just were fine. People in different countries were okay with less options. Like they were very, you know, in the habit of they liked certain sizes or types, and that's all they needed. So we did like something called a slim kit where you make the kit smaller. with less options, and it's less costly because you're not carrying as much inventory in one market. I think some of it's cultural. I think people need different things. You're going into different countries where you may just you have people in an OR that are all speaking maybe a few different languages. Not everyone has the same native language. And so we needed to make more like pictorial essays of our surgical technique guides so that someone who didn't necessarily speak the native language where they were could use it. And it was also universal to more countries, so we didn't have to translate quite as much. And then culturally, I think, learning to work with surgeons in different countries and, in times ask for help or feedback. I felt like international surgeons were very open to giving feedback. I think in a little way, some of them see medicine as a bit more of a service. And so I think they're in their, approach to medicine, it's very, maybe a little more evidence-based than it is in the US. So, the questions coming from them were a bit different, because of their health systems being, public in a lot of situations. The evidence is really important, for products. And so their questions tended to circle around evidence. So, there were differences, and I think it made it, a lot more interesting and fun once we were in those markets, different challenges. But yeah, it was really fun, to work with surgeons from all over the world.
Did you have to identify champions in different countries that would, get on board and
Yeah.
help?
So not me personally, we had some great people, in those regions that were experienced in orthopedics and had, did understand the networks really well of the surgeons. It's really interesting in the foot and ankle community. There's certain countries that kind of cross train a lot, like South Africa to US, Canada, UK. There's just, some of these countries you start to learn that, like, if the study is done in the UK, the Canadian surgeons may accept the data better and vice versa, because they know the networks. And so we thankfully had some folks at Paragon 28 who were very experienced in those regions and could identify champions and, people like that could bring the product and talk to their peers about it.
To your point earlier, Joanna, you need people that can wear different hats in the business, especially if you go international. I can't even imagine.
Mhm.
Just even language barriers aren't easy.
And body language. This is something, the small things that I'll just use eye language that I didn't recognize. And certainly in some of these AO meetings where you have international surgeons, and international etiquette, like there are some things that they're differences or cultural differences. And I appreciate so much what you said, Laura, that there are also some cross similarities. And so finding common ground, finding generalities when they work, but also finding the specifics where they're necessary.
Mhm.
And just learning to communicate with each other in ways that have impact. These are these small, soft skills. This being willing to ask for feedback and being willing to receive honest feedback is huge.
Yeah, we hosted an international meeting once a year, and it brought in surgeons from all these different countries that were needing to learn our newer products introduced in those markets. And it wasn't a huge meeting, but the discussions during their case presentations were fascinating because they really challenged each other and asked questions. And having sat in on a lot of US meetings and international, sometimes you get there with US based doctors really challenging each other, but sometimes I think people might be afraid to challenge the status quo a little bit. And we see it happen, which is great, but we don't always see it happen. I think sometimes people are willing to sit and listen and maybe not challenge it. And because maybe they feel that person is, very well known, or some reason they're not challenging it. But these surgeons they just really brought up a lot of different perspectives and questions that were different. And I think that was a result of just people being from all over the world and having different perspectives.
Big sociology experiment.
It is. Yeah. Also
And
a lot more smoking outside our building. I was like, wow, everyone is smoking.
Oh, right,
We're in
right.
Colorado. No one smokes here. But
Yeah, and they're all
yeah.
doctors.
I know. And foot and ankle, I'm like, oh no. But
Oh,
didn't
that's
stop them.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So Laura, when you transitioned out of Paragon 28
Uh-huh.
and you were going to go out on your own, you started a
Yeah.
consulting company. You knew the pain points that these companies are experiencing. So how
Yeah.
did that go? I mean, were they reaching out to you, or you reaching out to them?
Yeah, I've kind of a word of mouth business right now, just with my network. I kind of had several people, at our company had been there for a long time, and we all kind of, you start to just feel like you need something different. So I had some people that were now in new roles or starting their own things that had people that needed help. So I got word of mouth referrals, and it was mainly for people that were either individual inventors that needed help with just kind of either the commercialization or the regulatory aspects of their product, or it was small companies that needed things. And it's interesting what the problem they came to me with ended up usually being different than maybe the questions they were asking me toward the end of the project, where they were like, well, then, asking questions about building a sales force, or asking questions about contracting with doctors, like just things, that I had seen and experienced that I could lend some insight to, or at least help them get, some foundational things in place. And setting them up with the right people to talk to was fun, because those are problems you have when you're starting out and you're juggling like 80 balls at once, trying to keep things afloat, and it's incredibly challenging. So whatever tidbits of advice I could give them, I was hoping they could take what they wanted from that and use it.
Better to learn from your experience than to experience it themselves.
Yeah,
So-
there are some pitfalls. I was like, nope, you see these things, and or you just see things that they should be thinking about at that point in time. I mean, it's always a build. You can't do everything at once. And so it's, starting to lay the groundwork with them, like, hey, maybe you should start thinking about how you're receiving customer feedback and putting some procedures in place on what you're doing with that. And there's just things that have to happen, organically over time. And you just want to sort of give them a little flag that this is probably coming. So
That's a good point. I often think, you've got inventors, and inventors are, tinkering with things and have a vision, and they think this would help this segment of the population. And then when you start to build a business, and to your point, a sales force, regulatory, I mean, it's like you need adult supervision in the room, and you got to bring in specialists to deliver, because the inventor does not have all those skill sets. That's for sure.
Yep.
Very good.
And even like the willingness, when you were talked about kind of willing to let go, I would imagine too, in the very beginning, when you've poured yourself into something, you don't want to bring too many people in. Maybe I'm totally off base, but because this idea of like, oh, but it's mine, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do the things. But that's where you need someone else. You need the perspective of somebody that's been through it, or you need a sales, consultant. Like, the thing, having someone to help you understand what you don't know before you have to step in the landmine is worth its consultation fee often. And sometimes advice is what you get. You pay for, or you get what you pay for, right? So if you're not paying for it, then you're going to find out the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
working
why
with individual inventors and small companies. It's just very rewarding. Because these, folks have worked on the stuff and put in their own blood, sweat, and tears, and in their own money, and time into it. And so it's important to them to be very honest and straightforward and help them. And it's just rewarding when you see them making strides toward improving, wherever they're going.
Yeah.
great. Wow, what an interesting career. And you're so young still. You got so much to do yet. What's next on the horizon?
I'm actually gonna, I had the opportunity as, a consultant to work in spaces outside of foot and ankle, and that's what I was working on. So, I had experience in the urology space and breast reconstruction instrumentation and oral and maxillofacial, which is, people say feet are gross, but I'm going to argue that mouths and teeth are worse. Some of the pictures they were putting up during these projects, I was like, oh my gosh. But I got to realize that I know a lot more other than foot and ankle, and I can learn other technologies. And yeah, I was kind of itching to get back into a med device company to be a part of a process that is developing product. And so I'm gonna actually start in September with a medium-sized company to do interventional technology kind of in the vascular oncology space. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then, keeping my business, it's not going to go away, and I can still do a little bit of that on the side, for projects and people that need the help that I can help. So, yeah.
And can you do this remotely? So you can stay like in the beautiful mountains and things?
Yes, I'm staying in the beautiful mountains, doing it remotely. Yeah. Yeah.
Good for you. That's
Yes.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Joe, should we do some rapid fires?
I think we should. These are fun rapid fire.
Okay.
So nothing to be scared of, Laura. This is like the
Okay.
fun, silly rapid fire. So do you want to go
Great.
first, Jeff, or you want me to go?
You go.
All right. So you have a project that you got to get it done. What kind of music do you play? Or what did you play in the operating room when you were a surgeon? Either one.
Oh, so love rap music, especially like, kind of older rap like Snoop Dogg, and some of the newer stuff, big Kendrick Lamar fan, like actually a rap person. If I need to get in a zone, like electronic music, so like
Okay.
Calvin Harris, Skrillex, like kind of that kind of electronic music when I'm like typing away or trying to do stuff on Excel.
Flow state music.
Flow state music, yeah.
I love it. I think it would be hard to get in flow state with rap, but that
was more like operating, like, kind of the when I'm not at a computer, but for a computer, and an occasional classical. So
all right, fantastic. Any specific composer that you like?
like Tchaikovsky is probably one of my favorites to listen to. Just something in the background to make a little noise.
I love it.
Two-part question.
Okay.
Colorado, mountains in the summer or mountains in the winter?
Oof. Can I say both? Because I'm in the mountains right now.
You can.
Yeah, love skiing. I snowboard like once a year, but I ski mostly up there all the time in the winter. But the summer you can't beat. We got some great wildflowers right now. It's way hot in Denver, so it's nice here. It's like 45 in the morning and it gets up to 80. So it's perfect. So both.
So if you've got one weekend to go skiing anywhere in Colorado, what resort are you going to?
Well, I'm impartial to Winter Park, so this is where I stay, and I know it like the back of my hand. I could get all over the mountain, Mary Jane Winter Park. So it's a great family place. My kids are way better skiers than me, so they just flow past me on the mountain. I just cruise my moguls. So it's fun.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, when you were a kid, what were some of the hobbies that you did that you loved?
So big sports person, sports family. So playing basketball is like my favorite. Watching basketball. Played softball growing up. But I tinkered like Legos, tinker toys, like the mechanical building stuff was like puzzles, like all that stuff is just like, how do I put things together and fix things? And that really, like, even as an adult, like completely centers me. If I need to just like chill out, like I will do a puzzle, and you have to, like, I will have to set a timer to go to bed because I would stay up. Like I just get in a zone. So those are just like the kind of things, like putting messes back together is sort of what I thrive on.
Oh, I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, I heard a story once that the biggest ski club in America is in Florida, and the biggest diving club in America is in Colorado. So what do you like to do that is not Colorado centric when you go on a traveling trip?
Oh, that's a great question. Love to just walk new cities. Like my poor kids and my husband's on board with me, so we're aligned there. We just like love to walk new cities. And in walking, you walk to places to eat. And sometimes, a lot of times we don't plan it. We just walk by a place and we're like, this place just, is calling us, and we're hungry. And, it turns out we've had some of our best experiences in new cities, just walking them and finding places that we weren't planning on. So.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I can't help it, Jeff. I have to share another personal story. We were walking in Italy, in Florence, and we had to stop because of the smell. then like to your point of like not
Yeah.
picking restaurants, walked by this restaurant and both of us, you get like, I don't know, 15 feet away, and we both kind of just stopped and we're like, we need to go back. That place is amazing. Like like
Yes.
the freshness of what was coming out of the door. So now we don't we pick a couple places to go, and then the
Yeah,
rest is like the discovery places. And
exactly. I think that's a
that's
great way to
cool.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. If you could tell us about a book that has impacted your life, or author, if it's hard to
Okay.
pick just one.
So I read a book. Unfortunately, it was like at the end of my time at Paragon 28, but I wish I had read it like a few years earlier, but it's called Making Numbers Count. And I cannot remember the author's name off the top of my head, but yellow with black writing. But it tells you like how to explain numbers to people in a way that's like understandable and digestible. Because I think sometimes we look at studies and it's like, you read the numbers in the study and you're like, okay, but you don't really think about like, if I were to tell someone about the study, or if I were to like relay this to someone, how do I say it so like it really stands out? Because sometimes you like, especially working in device, you have, and I generated data. How do I talk to, our executive team, or how do I give material to our marketing team that the numbers make more sense? And this, it's like interesting. It kind of talks about like, wealth. So like if we had a staircase and you put the billionaires, they would be climbing stairs, for like 19 days versus we would just climb up one stair. Like they'd have to climb stairs for like 19 days to be at, like we would be at one stair. Like there's just ways to say things, and that's not the best example, but it's like, how do you put numbers into everyday life so that people can understand them? And it may be highly intelligent people that you're telling this to that are just really busy. Like, how do you stop your CEO and say like, these numbers are good, but you have to put it in a way that they're going to just like really be like stopped by the numbers. And so I've been like practicing that after I read that book to say, how do I make numbers more relevant to everyone? I've even done it with my kids for stuff, speed of light versus speed of sound, like those are things that you can put in terms of days. So like those things are important when you talk about numbers. And I think that's a language that is universally understood. And also like you could probably use AI for that, but there's like a way that you have to relate to people that I think is important. That's like unique, that you can make it interesting to people if you know their background.
Yeah, I love that. So I just Googled it. Making Numbers Count.
Yeah.
Chip Heath and Carla Starr.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
we love
fascinating
gathering
book.
books from our guests.
Yeah,
We'll have a whole Dean's Chat library, Jeff.
that's
We should
great.
Oh, I
start
know.
like a whole separate
I love
column.
it.
Do you have a list somewhere? That would be so helpful.
We need to make one. I just
Yeah,
decided
because
I'm
we
gonna have
ask
to
this a
spend
lot.
a weekend, of like
Yeah.
listening back to all of them and like just start writing them down.
So I have a question for you, and I find
Mhm.
I always think about this around like the Masters in golf or the
Mhm.
Wimbledon for tennis. Is there a sporting event that your family shuts down for on a weekend that you all are into watching?
Purdue basketball.
Purdue basketball.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
Like,
gosh, we need to connect you with Alex Core.
oh,
You do know
another
Alex?
fan?
He's a podiatrist.
No,
Oh, he's a big time
no.
Purdue. His dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We interviewed him
Yes.
last couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Really, Purdue basketball. So they're phenomenal.
They
Um,
are. They have been for the last few years. And Matt Painter, as a coach, like he identifies talent that no one else sees and develops these players like Zach Edey, who's like 7'4" from Canada.
Right.
He was a hockey player, and now he's in the NBA. And it's like he wasn't even one of the top recruits. Like the talent identification that he does in the player development is incredible to watch. And so we're really into it.
I always thought Gene Katie looked like the Purdue mascot.
He does. Yeah.
He does. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
and,
great.
And didn't Matt Painter play for Katie?
He did.
I
Yeah.
thought so. All right. No,
Mhm.
I'm a huge Big Ten fan. I just follow that stuff too.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So
That's funny, Jeff. It's like if dog owners that look like their dogs. That's funny.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
he looks like the mascot. So
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to
I
Google
always
that.
thought that was funny. Every time I'd look at the mascot for Purdue, I said, "My God, he looks like the coach." Oh my gosh. Well, Laura, we are so grateful for you taking time out of your busy life to join us on Dean's Chat. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been so fun.
Absolutely. Joe, any last words?
No, thank you so much, Laura. It has been just a treasure to get to know you, and I look forward to having more opportunities to chat. And the future is bright, and there's lots of options. And I really appreciate you sharing your personal experiences with us and the audience. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
you're so welcome. Yep.
Well, to all of our listeners out there, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating, or better yet, leave a couple comments. If you're watching on YouTube, by all means, become a subscriber. Joanne and I will continue to bring leaders in our profession. And it's amazing, Laura, because Joanne and I always say, it's amazing how many interesting stories we have in a small profession. And every day I learn something new and meet someone awesome. So thank you again for joining us.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. By the way, Laura, we're going to send you a Dean's Chat mug. You know, you can get that electronic music and a little caffeine going, and
For sure.
life is good. All right.
Totally.
Until next week, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.